Folks, thanks for hanging tight. Appreciate you all being here today. So we are here at the inaugural, the very first Bobcat chat of 2020. This is a series that we have started and are kicking off this year in place of our open house. So typically, right, in another time in a different year, we would have been welcoming you all to campus, having you join us here for a full day of programming and events that you would be, getting to see our students, getting to see everyone, involved and seeing what they're, how they're engaging with everyone. But for today, we're just going to be doing panels. So today, following the rest of the week and the next week as well, we're going to have panels highlighting different parts of the Bates experience. So for today, you're joining us for the student experience panel, where we have 2 students joining us with the possibility of another student joining. As always, there are technical difficulties that come along with doing these Zoom webinars. So we'll see if they can get to us, but if not, we do have 2 great panelists here today. So if you don't mind introducing yourselves, and then I'll go through, introduce myself and set up the webinar for us today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samuel. I come from New York City. 4-year senior majoring in history and politics. Very proud Bates student, and thank you all for being here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ashlyn Kelly. I'm a junior at Bates. I am a double major in Spanish and biochemistry, and I am from Hanover, New Hampshire. Thanks for coming.
Excellent. And myself, I am Nicole. I'm an admission counselor here in the office here at Bates. We cover schools based off of where you go to high school. So those are our territories. So for myself, I cover a lot of the Eastern Seaboard, the Mid-Atlantic, and parts of the South. So you're welcome to search Bates Counselors and Deans list, and you'll be able to see all of us listed out. Feel free to email, connect with your dean after this event. We're always happy to chat, happy to talk more offline or set up a meeting as well. So just to get us started today, if you look down at the bottom, you'll see the Q&A. That's where we will be accepting your questions. So please submit any and all questions throughout the panel. We have a few to get started just to get everyone warmed up, but definitely feel free to ask about anything and everything today. So just to start us off, the first question, I'll ask you both to answer it, is how was it like adjusting to Bates? Think back to your first year. I know that's a while for both of you being juniors and seniors, but what was that first year experience like?
That's a great question. Me coming from New York City, I know I was totally a city kid, looking for a different experience in something like Bates, where there's more outdoor opportunities. Of course, the outing club is quite famous at Bates. A lot of people know it and apply because of it. But I think that Bates does a really good job of making that process a lot easier than it might seem. I think that coming in, doing an FYS, where there is a lot of other first-year students to connect with once I was on campus, but also ASOP, where I was able to kind of experience that true Bates community. I think that made it a lot easier. So I would say that my transition was pretty smooth.
I also had an incredible first year and an incredible sophomore and so far junior year. But I think that the biggest transition for me, I'm from New Hampshire, so the weather wasn't really a transition, or small town wasn't really a transition. But the social scene, like I wasn't used to just being constantly surrounded by people my own age that were like ready to engage in conversation like at any moment. I was used to being pretty busy and introverted in high school. So I think that the biggest change for me was just meeting so many incredibly different people and then finding how many things in common I had with them. So yeah, my first year was definitely just a lot of talking to other people and getting to know them and finding out a lot about myself. That sounds really cheesy, but it's pretty true. And yeah, I really loved my first year seminar. I was in Disney Demystified, which is something that they talk a lot about in info sessions actually, because it sounds really cool, and it was really cool. So yeah, I had a great first year experience. Couldn't speak highly enough about it.
Thank you both. So we have some questions coming in. So we're just going to start with this first one that came in on what do you do on an average weekend? And obviously this will be a different answer. Your weekends right now, I imagine, are very different. So think back to your weekends last year.
Yeah, I can take a stab at this one. I think that weekends debates are one of the best thing about the college is that you have a lot of opportunities to do things when you're not in class, and there's always something to be done on campus. Personally, I'm a member of the debate team here on campus. So on a normal year, we'd be traveling down to Boston or Providence or another city in New England, looking to compete with a bunch of other schools from the New England area. And this is a super fun experience to get to bond with a lot of other Bates students, but also really test your own mettle intellectually. There's some very intelligent kids on the East Coast, and we compete quite high at a high level against all of them. So it's a lot of fun to be able to go down and experience that and compete on behalf of Bates. And something that I missed this year, but we'll get back to, I'm sure, shortly. So.
I know for me, I just got a Snapchat memory of like this time last year was actually the 80s dance. And so we were like, I got a video of all of me and my friends like screaming to Dancing Queen in the arcade, which is like an outdoor pavilion. And they were all like holding pieces of Domino's pizza. So I feel like that's obviously not every weekend that we have a school-wide dance, but when we do, they're so much fun because I think Bates is like unique in that everyone goes like from every grade. It's not just somewhere where you'll find like all the freshmen or all the seniors and like no one else feels comfortable going. Everyone goes all out in costumes, and like I was wearing like a bright neon shirt. So it's kind of crazy to see that video from last year. But besides like school events and hanging with friends, you would usually find me knitting a sweater in my room because I'm part of the coolest club on campus, which is Knitwits. So if you're ever looking to knit a scarf and drink some chai in the fireplace lounge, hit me up in the chat. I'll put you in contact with some really cool people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, that too, other than the clubs, I would say are on the weekends, we also have students who do their homework, and that's not something that you have to ever be ashamed of admitting that your academics are also a big part of being at Bates. So to that extent, we do have another question that came in. Would you say that Bates students are more collaborative or competitive?
I will definitely speak to this because this is the reason I actually came to Bates. So like 100% more collaborative because I came from a really competitive high school and I wanted to get as far away from that as possible. And so when I saw that at Bates, like you walk through the library and everyone's just like actually like talking to each other and no one's like head in a book stressed, or maybe there's a couple people, but I'd say that the biggest like draw for me about Bates is that everyone is competitive with themselves and they want themselves to do better. But all of our support systems on campus are students supporting students or professors supporting students. Like we have really great peer tutoring program, which I actually work in that center. And also the professors are 100% there to like make sure you're adjusting to college and you can get the most out of whatever class you're taking. So I would say 100% more collaborative, but that's been my experience.
Excellent, thank you so much. And we are being joined now by our one more Bates student. So if Anna, you want to go through, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we'll turn it over to another question about academics that you've brought up that is excellent, thinking about what are the support systems that exist outside. So Anna, if you also want to answer that, go ahead after your introduction.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a senior here. I'm a double major in American Studies and Anthropology, and I'm also involved in WRBC, which is our radio station, and the Bates Equestrian Team. So for support systems, for academic support systems, I know Aisling already mentioned that we have an ARC, so that's our Academic Resource Commons, so that's a peer student to student tutoring and academic help. It also includes our writing center. Also, you'll find various classes, especially intro classes, will have TAs, so teaching assistants. You'll always be taught by a professor here, but TAs will be there. In addition to that, so I was a econ TA back when I thought I was going to be an econ major. So I was just there to hold my own office hours, do work with students who needed it, and I was always just sort of available in the back of class if anyone needed extra help. And then if you're looking for outside of academics, we also have the counseling and psychological services, CAPS, to go to for mental health, as well as our health services for physical health. And yeah, so cool. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you, Anna. And does anyone else want to add anything else to that? All right, so just to go back, we had a question here from Sophia, because we sort of went over really quickly the acronyms for that freshman and sophomore year experience. So that first one, that FYS, that's another great source of your academic support system, your first year seminar. Because in that first year seminar, that's your time where you get to come to Bates and you are sort of put on an even playing field with everyone else. Just like that class that Aisling mentioned about, demystifying Disney. The idea was, you're studying these Disney films, you're deconstructing them, understanding where they're coming from, thinking about the systems that are in place in those films, but then you're doing a lot of writing. Because at Bates, we are a very writing intensive school, so that is definitely an area where we provide a lot of academic support. So that first year seminar gets to be the class that's really small, and you get in that habit of writing a paper, rewriting a paper, writing it again, and really just being comfortable in revising your own work and also seeking your peers' help in that. So that's that question. Hope that answers your question, Sophia, about the acronyms there. So moving on, we have one more panelist joining us. So Sam, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we will get started with more questions as well.
Good evening. Sorry I'm a little late here. Had some technical difficulties. My name is Sam Faasen. I am a sophomore, so the class of 2023 here at Bates College. I am double majoring in mathematics and neuroscience here. Aside from academics, I'm on the Bates men's rowing team. I am involved in the video game club here on campus, and Discordians, our board game club. I was an ASOP leader this past year, and I'm also on the Student Athletic Advisory Council. So great to see you all.
All right, thank you so much. So we have another question here thinking about, since you brought up all of your clubs, Sam, let's think about what are the club activities like at Bates? This is open to anyone who wants to answer. Feel free to just raise your hand or unmute yourself if you're going to take the question. So what are clubs like?
I can talk a little bit about this. I definitely found like my people here at Bates through WRBC, which is like I said earlier, the radio station. And I just applied kind of on a whim, like to bring it back to ASOP. My ASOP leader was involved in it and she really encouraged me to apply. And I've had a show there from 4 to 6 a.m. was my first slot. And then all the way to now I'm at probably one of the best slots because I'm now on the board. And I've done it all 4 years here, same person every year. We've done it together. And that's really formed a nice community for me. And I've really made some really close friends through that. And then I also have the Bates Equestrian team, which is a club sport. So club sports are also super big on this campus. And they're sort of a more chill, but like as competitive as you want way to get into sports that you might want to try for a new thing or something that you've done for your whole life, like horses are for me. So it's a good way to get into something that you want, find other people who are interested in that same thing, and you can do it as much or as little as you want. And I think that like it keeps a nice balance.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Anna's answers, I think one thing that's really cool about Bates is we have this thing called a club fair for all the incoming first years, which is a large gathering where all the clubs get together. You get a desk for each individual club, and each one will talk to you about what they do, and they do it in a lot of very creative ways. Certain clubs will play music, certain clubs will give out candy and things, other incentives to make you come talk to them. But that's also a really great opportunity to both meet people at the school in your first few weeks on campus, but also to just find yourself trying new things and going into different clubs. I know that I personally joined the chess club when I got here, which was a game that I just didn't know how to play. But I went in and I had a lot of fun with people that I never would have met otherwise. And that's really kind of quintessentially Bates in that sort of experience. So yeah.
Awesome. And feel free to flag me down if you want to add more to this question. But what I want to jump in and talk about is like the theme that I'm hearing in both of your responses about how these are things that you had never done before. I think that's a very common experience at Bates, the idea that all of our clubs, everything is open to everyone, regardless of your experience. So, if that means you've never seen snow in your life, you've never been on ice hockey skates, but you want to come and learn to play ice hockey, go for it, right? The equipment is there and the support is there to teach you. I think that's really the ethos at Bates, the environment of being welcoming and just open to teaching people about your passions and the things that you're excited about. So to that extent, thinking more about your experiences, what has been your favorite experience that you've had at Bates that could have only happened at Bates? I'm seeing some look away as people are really thinking about this one. So I'll buy you some time and feel free to think about anything that's Bates specific, what I can say, highlight at Bates. I don't know if Sammy, you want to talk about your thesis, or Anna. The thesis is something that is unique at Bates. It's required of all seniors to do a thesis in your senior year, and we're one of the few colleges that still require that. So I'd say that could be one experience that you have had at Bates that you could only have at Bates, but I'll stop here and let someone else speak.
Okay, well, this is kind of nerdy, but my favorite experience at Bates, I think that I could have only had here. So I came in wanting to be an anthropology major, and now I'm a Spanish and biochem double major. And the reason that happened was because I took an intro chem class, and that ended up being my favorite class I've ever taken. So I've taken classes that have these amazing titles, and like Disney Demystified, and classes that are more what you would expect from a liberal arts college. But still, my favorite class I've ever taken was Chem 107, like the introductory chem class. And I think that was genuinely because I came in thinking that all STEM professors were just going to stand up in the front of a class and give a lecture, and then you were just going to kind of fall asleep like 45 minutes into the class. And that wasn't it at all. All of the chem professors and all professors at Bates are really interested in pedagogy. So they look up what are ways to keep students engaged, what's the best way to keep students learning, and find their best learning strategies. So through that class, I found out that I'm actually really interested in science through a lot of office hours with my professor, a lot of group work in the class, lab work with my TA, just getting to know students and getting to know professors at Bates. I found out what I really wanted to do was chemistry. And I think at any other school, I would have just continued to take classes that I'd seen looked interesting, in shows like Disney Demystified. But instead, Bates professors really want you to get at what you're interested in and want to help you get the best experience out of what you're there for. So I'd say that was my best experience at Bates.
So my best experience that was quintessentially Bates actually didn't take place at Bates at all. So I last year was lucky enough to do one of the off-campus short terms. And so short term, I don't know if we've discussed it at all, but we have a kind of funky calendar where we do a 4-4-1. And so the fours are the normal classes that you would take your fall and spring semester, and then the one is actually a chance to really focus in on one class it's usually about the month of May. It's called short term, and I actually did one of mine off campus. So I was able to go to Alaska with one of my professors to study anthropology and archaeology in a small Alaskan village. So we spent a week with students at the local school, working with them and learning and teaching, co-learning about archaeology, because it was an intro class. You didn't have to have any archaeological experience. And then we spent 2 weeks actually working on an archaeological dig. So we would wake up in the morning and go out and get our hands dirty and actually do work. And it was really one of the most fulfilling and affirming experiences I've ever had, especially going somewhere that's so different, and working with a professor who cared so much and is one of my mentors. I go to her with everything. We Zoom all the time now. We Zoomed over the summer. I really do think of her as a mentor figure, and I think that that's so quintessentially Bates. All the professors care so much and are really focused on helping you succeed.
Awesome. Thank you so much to you both. So changing gears a little bit, but a topic I know that Bates students love to talk about, the food. What is the dining hall like? How inclusive is it for allergies and dietary restrictions?
Yeah, that is an awesome question. Thank you for asking. And I know that there are tons of students on campus who have this exact same question. And the great news is that often they're answered in ways that they're super excited about. So we have one dining hall on campus. It's called Commons. It's sort of the nexus, like the center of our campus. And all students will go there to pick up a meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And to answer your question specifically, we have a full service vegan bar, which is going to be different foods that are going to be changed every day, are going to be just as unique as the regular line dishes, and are on offer for students who prefer that. We also have sections for students with nut allergies, students who are gluten-free, and those are all options that are going to be quite thorough. And I know a lot of my friends as well have different dietary restrictions and are totally able to handle those on campus without going to Lewiston or without ordering things from far away. So it's definitely, Commons is definitely a blessing to have.
So the tag along question that I'm going to add is if someone wants to share, what's your favorite dish from Commons? What do you love to eat at Commons?
The falafel bar on Tuesdays and the vegan bar. Oh my gosh, my freshman year, like my friends and I, we would like be waiting for that week rotation where on Tuesday was falafel day. Oh my gosh, it's like I'm tearing up thinking about it. It's my favorite day in the entire world. I exclusively eat at the vegan bar. The apple Bavarian bars is a dessert that are so underrated. And everyone's like, yeah, the like flourless chocolate cake is really good. It's like everyone loves the flourless chocolate cake. But the apple Bavarian bars, I'm telling you, like they're the best. So those are my two favorites.
Mine's also a vegan bar classic, the vegan pad thai. Just so good, like one of the best, but they always have like consistently good meals. And one thing that's coming up this week, because I check the Commons menu every week, I go through every day, is the Italian almond cookies. On like the best cookies I've ever had. I'm gonna search down the recipe at some point before I graduate, so I can always have them in the back of my mind because they're so good.
Thank you. Yeah, I wish you all could have seen everyone's reactions as Aisling went through and like mentioned some of those things. Just a question for you, and feel free just to nod your heads. Are either of you vegan? Okay, one is not. So I think that's also like interesting to see that, you know, your favorite dishes can be at the vegan bar, and I think that speaks a lot to like the offerings and like the just variety that can be offered there. Where I remember one time I was doing a summer camp at a school and I was vegan for like that summer, and all I had to eat was just salads because there was just no variety, like nothing else being offered there. So one more tag along questions to that, thinking a little bit about food and sustainability at Bates. Do we have a greenhouse or gardening program? Yeah, do you want to tell us about it, Aisling?
Yeah, sure. So as a biochem major, like I just know about it because I know the greenhouse is in the biology building in Carnegie Science Hall. So it's at the very top. So when you're on campus, which hopefully you guys will be able to have a chance to actually come to Bates because it is a really gorgeous campus. You can look at the top of Carnegie and there is a greenhouse. I think that it's limited access to people who are in specific classes and clubs. But you can talk to biology professors if you're really interested in gardening and agriculture. There's a lot of really great biology classes. I know that like I have taken a bunch, but the professors that are on the plant side of biology are like absolute plant nerds, and they're the funniest and greatest people. So just like go up to them and be like, hey, what's up, Brian? How's it going? Can you take me here? Brian is a combination of the two guys, Brett and Ryan, that teach bio. But neither of them is actually named Brian. So that was too niche. I should have just said Brett.
Awesome, thank you. And yes, and then we also do have the Bates Student Garden. That is a club that you're welcome to join. And I do believe the food that is grown in that gets to be part of gets used in the dining common. So that's why I asked that question sort of as a tag along to the commons question. And so now we've got a fair number of questions about Lewiston. So Bates, located in the city of Lewiston, Auburn, in the state of Maine. So wondering if we can spend a little bit of time talking about Lewiston. To start off with, how do you interact with the town of Lewiston, or do you interact with Lewiston?
Well, I live off campus. So as a senior, you do have the ability to live off campus, but you are guaranteed housing your 4 years here, no matter what. So I, interact with Lewiston every day. I love cooking, so I've been cooking a lot of my meals. I've been going to the grocery store. I've been getting to know my neighbors. They're really lovely. One of them has a cat who has just started to, hang out with us. But when you're also living on campus and not having to go to the grocery store every day or having to talk to your neighbors, there's also lots of ways to get involved through Bates. So we have a really great resource called the Harvard Center, and they are available to connect students with volunteer and work opportunities in Lewiston. So they will connect you to different programs that work. They'll make sure you have transportation to get there, things like that. And if you, as a student, are noticing that a community that may be underserved, you also can reach out to them and they will help you figure out how best you can connect with them. So whether that's giving you funding to start a program or, to do surveys or things like that. So it's a really great way to get involved with the community and really get you out of that liberal arts bubble,
I'd love to jump off Anna and just say that one of my friends has been heavily involved with Lewiston Auburn. She contacted the Harvard Center and basically created her own program where her and a bunch of her friends go Thursday mornings and serve at the soup kitchen weekly. And so it's just one example of how you can really get involved in the community. And, even if we don't offer something that you think we should, the Harvard Center is definitely going to be there to help you and support you with whatever you want to establish, be it working at a soup kitchen or just going out and, like I did last year, mentoring a student from Lewiston High School through their 4 years or something like that. There's a lot of opportunities to get involved in the Lewiston Auburn community.
I also like to jump off of Samuel there. I also want to say that there's a lot of different levels of involvement that you can have. So through your 4 years at Bates, every student is going to have some form of community engagement, whether it be with your first year center, which is the people that live on your hall. Most JAs will take you out into Lewiston. We used to make pancakes at a local shelter every other Saturday, which was so much fun. And I was the flipper. That was my job. But there's also a lot of different other opportunities. My first short term here at Bates when I was a freshman, and again, short term is that little few weeks at the end of the term where you only take one class. I actually took an EMS class, so I got my EMT license. And people from our local ambulance service, United Ambulance, came and taught us. And then we actually got to work on the ambulances and go on calls around Lewiston. So that was definitely my craziest experience in seeing Lewiston, because nobody knew I was a Bates student. I was just somebody on an ambulance that was having to hold their head or take their blood pressure. And that was, for me, the craziest experience ever, that I got the opportunity to do that through Bates. But there's also a lot of classes, general education classes, in which you will be required to spend hours in local schools, which I know a lot of students do. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And then the next question that I'm going to ask, still on the topic of Lewiston, is just what are your favorite things to do in Lewiston? So be thinking on that. Feel free to raise your hand to let me know, to pass it off to you. But just to answer another question that came in and summarize it up, if a lot of people participate in activism or in community service. So yes, definitely through that Harwood Center is where we are seeing a lot of that community engagement. I believe it's about 40% of our classes that built into the academics, you have a component that is getting you involved in the community. And outside of that, I would say definitely, I think students at Bates are very active, are very vocal, are involved in the community and on the campus community through that. So back to Lewiston, what are your favorite things to do there? Who wants to take this one first? All right, Samuel.
Yeah, I think some of my favorite things to do in Lewiston have been to just hear from the locals and do things like the locals do. I know that every week there's a farmer's market in Lewiston, which is a huge event for a lot of Bates students. And going there and just interacting with people to hear their stories of what life is like in Lewiston and their joy and their jokes, and to get to know people from the community is just an amazing experience. I know a lot of people from Lewiston really appreciate Bates and really appreciate Bates students for the sort of environment that we bring in the community service as well. So it is just, I would say that going to places where Lewiston residents are having events and are welcoming is always a huge opportunity. And so it's super fun to do.
Perfect. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that question? Yeah, go for it.
I think it's just like important to like note the history of Lewiston. So like hopefully when you guys are doing your research on Bates, you look up not only like its founding and the history with being a co-educational college, but also the history of Lewiston and how it's been a home for a lot of refugees, specifically the greatest population being from Somalia. So we get a very diverse population that way. And I think that a huge part of the Harwood Center is to make sure that community engagement isn't like, oh, we're from this like liberal arts college that is like wealthier, and then like we see a great socioeconomic divide. So I think that a lot of interacting with Lewiston is trying to like disable those stereotypes. So I find that like what Bates students have been like very respectful about, like noticing that Lewiston is our home away from home, but it's someone else's home, and that we don't like act like we own Lewiston. So like students will go to Forage, the local coffee place, or the movie theater, and like hang out. And I think that over years, like we have developed a really great relationship with Lewiston. So like just if you do want to come to Bates, like just to maintain that and to like really appreciate that we're in such a great part of the world.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up, Aisling, because that brings me to another question that I was just going to tackle before I get to it. For the panelists, we have been receiving some questions that are very specific and directed to you all. So if you want to check the chat, I'm going to ask that our panelists just type out their answers to send them to you, since we are over halfway there and have not even gotten through half of the questions that have been asked. So this question came in about, be honest, what do you think of Lewis? And I think that what prospective students have a sense of like sort of surprise, maybe it's disjointment, that they've been visiting a lot of other small liberal art colleges around the New England area, especially some that are also in Maine, and they get to Lewis and Auburn and it's very different, right? Going back to that history that Aisling's talking about, where we're a predominantly working class blue collar town. We're the second largest metropolitan area in the state of Maine, and really have been through a lot as a community. So going back to, thinking about the time where as you drive around, you're going to see a lot of mill buildings in the Lewis and Auburn area. We were big mill town, big producers of paper, of textiles. But if you think about history, right, that post-industrial revolution period where all of that industry leaves the US, leaves those mill towns, you see declines. Huge economic collapse around all of the mill towns in New England, because they're losing sort of the biggest economy that exists. So what you see when people have asked questions about like, oh, but Lewiston looks a little sketchy, and what we in admissions want to push back on, and especially like our students on campus push back on, is that, hey, what you're talking about there is poverty. What you're talking about there is racial diversity, and what you're seeing is that those divides, and also just like the things that exist in and around a town that is, blue collar, working class, and we're still looking to find our identity, right? I think in Maine overall, the biggest source of its, economic growth and drive has been tourism. So how do we find ways to bring that tourism to Lewis and Auburn when we're not on the coast? We're not this, small coastal town that can provide you all those other things. We're still finding our niche of where we fit in. And so definitely like to highlight the huge population of refugees and asylum seekers that over the last 20 years have been moving into the area and have really radically shifted the demographics. So being honest, being upfront about the state of Maine, we are the whitest state, maybe the whitest, if not one of the whitest states in the US, right? Not a lot of diversity, but in the Lewiston Auburn area, you go to the local high school and there's over 35 languages being spoken, right? Where you've gotten this huge influx and a changing demographic. I think also important to note, one of our city councilors here in Lewiston Auburn is a young 24-year-old woman, 24-year-old Somali immigrant who is now like making change. So I think it's also an interesting place to be in, where its demographics are changing and the city's growing. So that's sort of like, be honest, like that's what we think about Lewiston, is that we think about its growth, we think about where it's come from, and we think about where it's going and the place and the role that Bates plays in that, right? Thinking back to what we've talked about with the Harwood Center and how that's a big influx there. So enough from me. We're gonna go back to our questions. So thinking about, what is one thing that you wish you had known before going to Bates? Sort of more an advice-based question. And I'll look to see whoever is not typing out their answers right now. Looks like it's you, Aisling. You made eye contact.
I was saying that I was typing, but I will totally speak to that. So I think that I wish I had known that it's okay to change your mind like a million times. And that you do not need to know what you want to do coming in. And I know that that's probably something that you've like heard a million times, but I still like was very convinced that I was going to be a pre-med anthropology student and that I was going to not go abroad, but instead do this and like that. And yeah, it totally changed as soon as I actually spent time on campus and actually talked to professors and allowed myself to do what I was interested in. And yeah, I think that that's something that's not specific to Bates, but more specific to college, is to just like be comfortable being yourself. So.
Thank you so much. So sorry that I misread our hand signals there. So another question that anyone here can definitely tackle is housing at Bates. What is housing like, and what's your experience been being at a residential college for the past couple of years?
I can take this one. I assume that the question is more speaking to maybe freshman housing. And seeing as I just went through that, maybe I can speak to it a little better. Housing so far has been phenomenal for me. I have had a great experience both last year. I was in a triple in Page Hall last year. And even though it was a little cramped, my roommates were just fantastic. The housing process, if you don't know, when you're a freshman going into Bates, you're going to fill out a survey, basically ask you questions like, do you like your room clean? When do you go to bed? Do you like to study in the room or outside? That sort of thing. And so you'll be matched with roommates based on that survey. And I have heard rarely any instances where students have had difficulty with their roommates. If anything, Bates does an amazing job pairing you with your roommates your freshman year. And so I've heard across the board great things no matter what hall you live in. All the halls here are awesome in their own unique ways. And then, looking beyond that, the housing process for me as a sophomore has been pretty good too. But hopefully I answered the question mostly about freshman housing. So.
Thank you. And was there anyone who wanted to jump in, add anything more? I think I saw. Seeing no? All right. So moving on, thinking about classes specifically. So what's been the most difficult class that you've had at Bates?
Yeah, well, for one, Bates is a very difficult institution. It's a very challenging place to get an education and for many other things, but it's also a place that's very supportive. Bringing it back to the question about getting help out of class. But for me, I think it was my first year when I took a lab, which was one of our requirements for Gen Ed here at Bates. And that's an important part of the process here, which is learning about different things outside of your major and becoming a more well-rounded student and a more well-rounded person. Labs and sciences were not necessarily my strong suit in high school, but as I got here, I tried one about the physics of sports. And going into a science building, seeing a lab again for the first time since high school was definitely a strange experience. But going through it, I struggled a little bit, but I actually found a tutor in my class, someone who was willing to just help me through that particular process. So through that, I learned a lot about, firstly, just the topic about the physics of sports and everything like that, but also just got through that process with the help of another Bates student. So I would say that was my hardest and most difficult class here at Bates, but it was also a really positive experience in the end. So.
Thank you, Samuel. Are there any other folks who want to add to this question? All right. Yes, Samuel as well.
I think for me, kind of on the opposite end, I'm very STEM focused. That's my like passion. That's where I'm going to be. And I definitely say one of my hardest classes was, it was called Introduction to Drama, Theater and Film. It was this relatively intensive theater course. I took a lot of theater back in middle and high school. And it was a heavy writing requirement, and I am not the best at essays. But it was great because I was able to go to the professor and talk to him, see like if I could get help from him or help from, is there, an attached tutor to the class or someone I can go to. The writing center was also fantastic. So my professor directed me to the writing center and also helped me tweak some of my essays with some revisions to make them a little better. And so I'd certainly say that while I had a great deal of difficulty with, obviously just writing essays and the sort of humanities side of things, there were, like Samuel was talking about, a lot of resources and opportunities, both on a student level and also on a staff and faculty level as well. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, go on. Please add.
So I totally agree with Samuel. So I'm also a STEM person, but my other major is Spanish. My hardest class I've ever taken was a 300 level Spanish course. It was last year, I was the only sophomore in the class and everyone else was a junior or senior. And everyone in the class had just gotten back from abroad or grew up in a family that spoke fluent Spanish. So I felt like completely out of my depth, and I like talked to the professor the first day and I was like, I think I should drop this class. But it was the only Spanish class I could take that semester. And he was like, look, like I have office hours. They're there for a reason. Just try it for another week and like, we'll see where that goes. And so I did, I tried it for another week and I was like, I felt so like out of place in the class, especially because I didn't really know anybody. And then two of the boys who were seniors were my coworkers at the IT desk, and they like saw that I just felt so uncomfortable, and they like added me to their group chat, and then they would be like, if you need help on this homework assignment, like just let us know. We'll be at the IT desk later. And it was just like a really great way for me to meet upperclassmen students. And they were so, so helpful. Like Samuel was saying, like your peers in your class will also be there to help you. And then I ended up getting knee surgery in the middle of the semester. And my professor was incredible. Like he sent me the assignments on different formats that were easier for me to do, like from bed. He like canceled a bunch of my assignments and just said like, you are not writing this essay when you had surgery like a week ago. And I was just so shocked by professors' willingness to just like change their syllabus for you. And I have a concussion right now and the same thing has happened. Like I have that same professor again, and my English professor has like changed my syllabus because of like my concussion. Like professors aren't there to like make sure you follow their rules, but instead like make sure you get the most out of their class. So while that was the hardest class I've ever taken at Bates, it's also like where I've learned the most and where I got the most help. So.
Yeah, so the hardest class I've ever taken was a class called Reading Marx, Rethinking Marxism. It was a politics class. It was very theory heavy. So we read all of Capital Volume 1, which for context is 1,000+ pages, from the beginning of September to October break in like October 13th or whenever it was. So it was just heavy theory all the time. And with like papers that were really intense, like the first paper we had was like, what's something that just using capital that you think Marx, like you could expand on that Marx said. So like we're literally critiquing Marx. And I was a sophomore. I was a fresh, like my first semester sophomore year. And I was like, oh my God, like this is so much. And I would just like went to the professor's office every paper and I would ask him, I would say like, so here's like, I don't really know how to develop this idea. Like here, let me like say what I'm doing. And then he would sit there quietly and like look at me for like 30 seconds. It threw me off so much every time because like, you know, you expect like a little bit of conversation. And then he would like come out and say, so I think what you're thinking is this. And he would diagram exactly what I would have been thinking, but couldn't put into words. And like, it was incredible. And I learned so much. It like helped develop my like thinking as a student and as just like a person going through the world. And it was like definitely the hardest class I've ever taken, but it also has like been so life-changing. Like I carry the books that we read in that class like around all the time because they're just so like useful to have, and like it was so influential, and I'm using like a bunch of them in my thesis. I'm using them like everywhere. So it was really life-changing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think those were all excellent responses. And Anna, you really hit the nail on the head with that, you know, the classes at Bates are going to be hard. They're going to be challenging and difficult, but not just for the sake of being challenging and difficult, but really to push you to grow, to push you to stretch your mind, to be like, you're getting at it, Anna. You really, you know what you want to say in this essay, but just let me help you organize it. Let me help you lay it out in this specific way. And I think that's really what the Bates is all about, right? The idea of educating the whole person is knowing that you have great independent thought, you have great ability to understand material, and you have great depth to be challenged. And that's what we're here for, is to just keep challenging you and pushing you along in your academic journey. So another question here, how has Bates been handling the pandemic? So for those of you who are on campus, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can take it for a little bit, and then Samuel, I'm sure you'll have more to say. So as an off-campus student, like I knew I was going to be off campus before the pandemic and like it was all set. I was really worried that I wouldn't have access to as many resources as like students on campus. Like if say I had to quarantine, like would I have meals delivered even though I wasn't on campus? And so I reached out to health services and the people who've been in charge, and they were like, no, the even if you're off campus, like you'll still have the same access to resources. Like you'll still have like food delivered if you have to quarantine. You'll still be tested twice a week. You'll still like have all these like things available that I was definitely a little worried about before. We do get tested twice a week for all students, and it's not the one that goes all the way up your nose and like pokes your brain, which is really nice. It's just a couple of swipes in your nose and then they send it off. So it's been a lot smoother than like even I expected, and I had pretty high hopes, but even now like we've only had 2 cases total, and both have recovered at this point. Everyone has been very safe. Everyone's wearing masks, and professors had the option of either doing online or in person, and they had the ability to change that whenever they wanted, which was really important to me coming from like a perspective of having 2 professor parents, knowing that Bates also had the well-being of its faculty and staff in mind during this, and was making sure that everybody was being safe, students and faculty and staff. So
yeah, I think Anna did a great job answering the question. If I could add just one thing, would be the adaptability that Bates has shown. I think that this happened in the middle of a school year. This is something that has never happened before. And within 2 weeks, there was at least 4 emails from Clayton Spencer, who's the head of our school, talking about what's going on in the school, what the kind of discussions they're having behind the scenes are, and what the plan is for the next week. And that was a huge comfort. I mean, it seems like such a long time ago now, but if you all remember what it felt like in February and how different things were and how uncertain everything was, just to have that backbone of knowing that the people who are making decisions value that you know what they're doing and value that you feel comfortable in what they're doing is super critical. So we saw changes within even a week at Bates. And then this year, all those changes that we've learned from last year have been implemented. And so far, as Anna said, it has been an extraordinarily safe process. And thankfully, everyone has been pretty comfortable on campus.
Yeah, go ahead, Aislinn.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add to that too, like with how professors have been handling it. I think that like whether they choose to be online or in person, I think that one of the most important things is that they're accommodating student needs and they're taking into account things like mental health, like where you are, whether or not your internet crashes. Like my professors both started, so we split our semester into 2 so that you're only taking 2 classes at a time to reduce student contact. But instead of just like cranking up the work because you're only taking 2 classes at a time, I'd say that my professors actually like dialed it back because they're like, these are weird times and like we understand that it's different, like it's a different environment. You might not feel as comfortable like doing work or like going to the library. It's harder to focus if you're just staying in your room all day. Even though that's not we're still seeing each other, going outside safely, social distancing, but it is a weird environment to be doing work. And I'm sure if some of you guys are online for your school, it's just very strange. So I've really appreciated that my professors have been in close contact, being like, hey, how's it going so far? Like, is the workload too much? Is the Zoom meeting going well? Like, what can I do to change? Like, what are your other professors doing? So just a lot of communication, which I've really, really appreciated.
Awesome, thank you. And we did have just one more question come in about what percentage of our classes are in person. I do believe it's between 70 to 75% that are in person, and that has been due to that idea, splitting into 2 modules. So that really helped us to de-densify the campus, be able to spread out classes more, have classes be spread out, as well as having classes, our schedule is a little elongated. We do have some night classes now, as well as some weekend classes. So that all together has been able to allow us to safely have in-person classes there. So another question here, just wondering, since we talked about how challenging our classes are at Bates, also don't want to scare everyone away. How is the work-life balance? Are you constantly studying, or do you feel like your life is balanced between your other activities?
I think my life is pretty balanced. Like, I have the classes that I'm in right now. I'm in a seminar, an English seminar, and an education class. So like a 200 level education class. And it's definitely not been too overwhelming. I'm also working on Thesis. So I've definitely have had a lot to do. But I still have been, finding time to cook dinners with my roommate. I mean, like, right now I've got waiting for me a halloumi, like Indian dish, and I'm so excited about it. But we like cook every day, and we, have dinners together. So I've definitely been like making sure to keep things balanced. And you definitely learn to manage your schedule really well here, because it's not good to just focus on work all the time. And there's enough things to do around here that you don't have to. So I would say I keep my schedule pretty balanced.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and I'll say that's definitely something that it's a skill that you learn in that first year. I think earlier Samuel mentioned the club and org fair, where you go and you sign up for all of these clubs, and definitely I think in that first year you overcommit yourself. For sure, you sign up for, like, I've heard of students who've signed up for like all of the clubs and are all of the listservs, and then by the end of that first semester they're like, oh, okay, I can't feasibly be in every club and team on campus, and I need to decide where my energy goes to. And you find that you learn that balance from seeing the seniors and juniors and seeing how they're doing that. So we are right at about time, so we're going to end with just 2 quick questions. But first off, we did have a question about how easy it is to go on and off campus, how easy is it to get to the airport. So I did want to highlight that we do have a shuttle that will run during breaks and also near the end of the school year to get students both to the Portland Jetport and also the Boston International Airport. So pretty easy to get to the airport there. I know for this time in the pandemic, traveling was tricky, right, to get back to campus. So we did have shuttles that brought all of our students from the airport back to campus if you were flying, or from the bus station to campus. So we definitely we're trying to be supportive of our students there. So the last question that I just want to end on, thinking about, what are, I know this is a question that I asked all of you when I was hiring you on as students. So I'm interested to see what you want to share here. What's your best advice to prospective students, other than just being yourself? That is a cop-out. So what is your best piece of advice that you can give to these seniors as they're embarking on their search process?
Like, I know this is going to sound literally impossible, but don't panic. Like, don't stress yourself out too much, because what you're going to find is like all the schools that you've stressed out the most about, like, aren't going to be right for you. Like, you're going to get to where you're supposed to be. And that sounds so corny. But like, that's what really sort of saved me, was like, if I am getting too stressed out with like the idea of this place, then maybe it's never going to live up to my expectations. So like, honestly, I know it's just be yourself is so, everyone says that, but that's exactly what you want, because you don't want to fake your way into somewhere that isn't right for you. And just like really highlight the things that you care about, because I guess someone who's been doing interviews, like, that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear what you think I want to hear. I want to hear what you really care about. So yeah, just make sure to highlight what you love on your application.
I think that this is like more of general advice rather than like Bates advice, but just for your mindset going into the application process, because it is so stressful. Something that everyone always says, like, you will find the right place for you. But I don't really believe that there is one right place for every person. Like, I think that you can find like a great college wherever you go, and it's really about what you make of the experience. Like, I personally had a terrible college application process, and it like destroyed my senior year. But then I got to Bates and I was like, I don't know what I was stressing about. Like, I love it here. And probably I would have like had a great time at any of the other colleges that I like was looking at. I mean, there were a lot of draws that pulled me into Bates, but it really is like what you make of it, what clubs you go and try to like find like cool people at, like what classes you take, and like how much you put yourself out there, and like genuinely what you make of it. And that sounds like easy to like, it sounds like it should be obvious, but I think that you kind of get wrapped up in this, like, you will find the place that's meant for you. And that's, I feel like, not really how life actually works. I think that there are multiple places in which you will find like a great community. So don't stress about finding the one college, but rather find a lot of places where you can see yourself feeling at home. That's what's more important.
Yeah, I would say just don't give up like pieces of yourself that are important. I know the college process is super stressful and you get a lot of advice from a lot of people. But you've done a lot of things in high school to get to this point. If you're applying to Bates, then we already know that you're a great student who's doing a lot of different things. All those things that are important to you, keep doing them, keep looking for them in colleges. And it's going to really get you the experience that you're looking for. I think piggybacking off of what Aisling said, that there might not be the right institution, but if it has the things that you're interested in and what you're passionate about, you'll find that community there, and that's going to mean a world of difference.
Everyone's saying all good things. I'm just, off the top of my head, it's a lot of what's been said before, but you just honestly, you have to go into it with an open mind and know that it is going to be an important decision that affects the coming years of your life, but you can't let it own your entire senior year. Like, you still have to live, you still have to experience, you know, and no matter whether you're stressing about that application or not, it's still going to come in. So, you know, you just got to make sure that while you are focused on college and it is an important aspect of your senior year, that you're not sacrificing everything that you enjoy and like about your senior year just to come, you know, just to apply to a bunch of places that you're going to then be at. So I guess my advice would be, on top of what everyone has said so far, which has been awesome, is to make sure that you're taking advantage of the opportunities you have during your senior year, while also still, you know, applying. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists for joining us tonight. I think you all did a fantastic job of representing Bates. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. The conversation doesn't have to end here. As I mentioned, we do have these panels running throughout this week as well as next week. I recognize there are some questions that we did not get to, but feel free to attend those panels, ask your questions there. We do have one panel that's just devoted to all of our clubs on campus. So get to hear about that club experience at Bates, as well as our interviews. So we had 2 seniors here today with us, and they are our senior fellows who do all of the interviews. So feel free to sign up for an interview, meet with them one-on-one. Also, all of our students are available on the Ask a Student page at Bates. So that's where you can see their profiles, send them an email. And again, keep connecting, keep this conversation up. But thank you all so much for being here today with us. Appreciate your time. I recognize we've gone over in time, but I really wanted to get to that question about advice. I know that it can be one that you hear some new information, and I think that you hear it better from your peers and from me as the admission counselor, because I could tell you all day not to stress out about it, but I think hearing it from your peer, hopefully it hits a little bit closer to home. So thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, night, wherever you are, and thank you.